Hello everyone. I'm going to be talking a little bit more on a practical aspect of computer vision. So thank you for being there after the two amazing presentations. And yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Wildlife.ai, which, as Jimmy pointed out, is a non-for-profit, with this part of the three potential non-for-profits for this month's donations from Voxel 51. So what do we do at Wildlife.ai? We use AI to accelerate wildlife conservation. And today, the presentation is going to be divided into 4 sections. I'm going to be providing a little bit of background on AI and conservation. I'm going to be talking more about the work that we do at the non-for-profit. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper onto our wildlife watcher and wrap up on how I see computer vision for conservation. So when I say I am a biologist. So any of the technical questions, I might be limited on answering them, but I will pass it along to the rest of my team. So I'm a wildlife biologist, and I have 10+ year experience crunching data to accelerate wildlife conservation. But I'm not alone on Wildlife.ai. I have a fantastic team of experts. We have David Anderson, who is the data scientist. We have Charles Palmer, who is the electronic engineer. Cal, who is on the hardware side of things. Leona, bringing the community along, and Dror, helping with the project management. So providing more information on biological conservation and wildlife conservation. We are facing massive extinction, where if we keep on doing business as usual, around 1 million of species are going to face extinction. It is quite dark. It is quite hard, I guess, to see it like that. But it is the way that we are in alarming situations. So what do we need to do to try to prevent some of these species to go to extinct? From a biology point of view, we need to know where those species are, what kind of population dynamics they are having, whether they are increasing, whether they are decreasing, and why they are decreasing, and what can we do to try to prevent further species extinctions. So having that accurate and real-time information, it will be crucial to be able to manage correctly these species that are threatened. And providing more information onto what kind of data we have in conservation. Let's imagine that the life cycle of the data is collecting the information, processing it, and then providing an output. So the current approach in wildlife conservation, we have experts on the field. We have usually conservation professionals, biologists, going for a certain amount of time onto the field, collecting information from a specific area. So it provides spatio-temporal limitations. We then bring the information onto the lab, and we process it manually on our lab locally to try to get insights for our specific project. So this kind of system, it is hard for others to replicate in other places, and it's hard to compare whether others are on the same situation than us. It will be really hard for others to replicate this this methodology. So with the AI assisted approach, we have instead of professionals for a certain amount of time, we can have volunteers and citizen scientists anywhere with their mobile phones, just snapping photos of what they've seen in terms of wildlife, anything related to the environment. They can provide that information. We can deploy remote sensors to have been working there for longer than people can. We have satellite imagery, which will give you different types of information, and we can collect all that information quite quickly, relatively easy compared to the current approach. We'll be able to process that information automatically, so it will be faster and more accurate to be processed, and it will enable us to have these global insights of what is happening onto the environment on a global level, and be able to be reproduced throughout different parts. So if the AI assisted approach is way much better than the current approach, why is there no more of that? Well, there is a big gap between AI and conservation at the moment, and we believe that is because most of the conservation happening on the ground is community driven, and is driven by governments and by organizations with limited knowledge of what artificial intelligence is, and specifically machine learning, computer vision. And those that know or are aware of how AI tools can accelerate their work, and they don't have the resources. So that's the reason why we created Wildlife.ai 3 years ago, to try to bridge that gap between conservation and machine learning. And the way that we do that is through 3 main pillars that we have. Wildlife.ai. One is through conservation projects, where we work on the ground to develop tools and to implement open source tools to get some of these projects a head start, a faster way to manage the information. We develop a community of data scientists. We call them data rangers. So they help specific projects to develop the tools that they need to implement, so they can use the skills for environmental good. And we also have educational resources where we go into schools and onto communities, and we demystify AI, and we provide easy to use solutions for people to understand how AI works and how it can be used for good. So jumping onto the conservation side of things, we work for these 8 sustainable development goals, providing quality education, innovating to prevent the impacts of climate change and habitat destruction, both above and below water. And we do this by partnering with community groups, with organizations, by other environmental organizations, with governments, with private companies, anyone who wants to really make a difference towards sustainability. So in terms of projects, we start a project by identifying a conservation challenge, and then we look at what kind of tools are available. Is there any open source tool that is available? Can we implement it straight away? What does it need to happen? What does it require to implement this tool? If there is no tool available, then we develop it. And we develop it in a way that is scalable and that it can be adaptable to different environments and different ecosystems. And throughout the journey of using these tools, we involve the scientists and the communities alone, because in conservation, it is crucial to have the community behind, because even if you have the perfect tool, if people are not behind that tool, they are not going to use it, and it's not going to be useful. So one specific challenge project that we are working, I'm going to provide a little bit of biology 101 information. So I'm based in New Zealand, and here in New Zealand we have a challenge in conservation, which is invasive species. So invasive species are introduced species like the sheep rat that has been introduced around 100 years ago into New Zealand, and they predate onto native species. So the native species have evolved without any mechanisms to protect them from being predated by the rat, and unfortunately they are driving them to extinction. So we need to control them through fences or through traps or through any other mechanism that we have available. And the biggest challenge that we have at the moment is when we are trying to control them with traps. For example, if we set up 20 traps in an area, maybe the traps are not getting any rats, so we can say, oh yeah, there are no rats, so the native species should be doing fine. But maybe the rats are just out there, but they are not getting into the traps because there is already enough food out there, so they are not interested onto getting onto the traps. So how do we monitor? How do we know how many rats are out there? How many native species like this tree weta, one of the largest insects in the world? How do we know whether our work is actually working? How do we know whether we need to keep on doing more trapping or the fence that we set up is working? So this is the conservation challenge that we are working to try to solve. And the solution that we came up with is the Wildlife Watcher, which is camera facing down onto the ground, onto a wooden plate, and some fences to try to redirect the animals so that they can be taken photos of. This photo looks like a 9-year-old droid, and it is true, a 9-year-old drew this photo. So again, we are working with the community, with local communities, to develop these tools. So this is how the prototypes actually look on the field. So we set them up with the students that help us putting these tools together. And what you see there is a 3D printed case where we have inside the electronics, which is OpenMV camera, where you can run the machine learning on the device, and the actual camera, batteries, and information to communicate with the mobiles, so that you can turn them on and turn them off without opening them. So those are the prototypes that we set up. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more on to the results that we got, but the idea is to make this prototype from a local challenge to become to have a global impact. So it will be a camera that it can monitor multiple species, that it can provide real-time ecosystem health. So it will let you know what kind of animals are out there and whether the population is increasing or decreasing. And throughout the process, build an open source community of people that are interested in technology and people that are interested in the environment. So how the computer vision side of things work on our project, how we get the data from these prototypes that we have, the Wildlife Watchers, and how the data gets processed. So we have 4 sections: one that is around the labeling part, one that is training the models, one that is creating the embedded models, and then providing the observations there, and the wildlife observation, the species observation. So for that, we have a set of tools that, again, is open source, so you will be able to check it out on our repository. And for the labeling side of things, we use CVAT and 51, so all the time working with open source tools. And if there is any of the videos that we see that we cannot identify, we don't know what is the species, we have the option to push the observations to iNaturalist, which is a network of biologists and taxonomists, where they can identify the species. We train the models and we look at the performance using weights and biases and edge impulse, and which we also use to create the impulses that it goes onto the camera. We publish the models onto Zenodo, so anyone can use the models, and those models generate observations of rats or wettas or any animal that we have trained it on, and we publish those actual observations, biological observations, onto an open repository, GBIF. So those are the tools that we are working at the moment, but I would love, on the experience that all of you have on computer vision and data management, to provide any suggestions of other tools that might have skipped our radar. So the way that we operate with these different tools, we use Jupyter notebooks. So it is a trade-off between having no code at all, but having some easy to develop tools that biologists with a little bit of an understanding of Python can run easily. So the data set that we have for the from the camera, it looks like this. So what you are looking at is from the camera above from the ground, maybe like 15 centimeters above. And what you see is a piece of wood with a grid, and there was a weta, one of the largest insects in the world, just passing by. And that's a possum just checking out the device. That's a rat just walking around. Again, we don't have any bait or anything like that. We could use it, but at the moment we just wanted to see what is out there. We have lizards, we have worms, anything that passes by, it gets recorded. So that's just an example of some of the videos. We collected over 7,000 videos. Our initial goal is to have a rat detection model. So the videos are around 8 seconds. It is 40 frames in total. And we set them up in 5 locations at the moment. And out of those 7,800 videos, which, by the way, we are working with Voxel 51 to make this data set available onto their catalog. So out of those videos, most of them were empty. The triggering mechanism that we used, it was being triggered by the rain, by wind, by leaves. So most of those videos were empty, and only 1% of those 7,000 videos, it was like 110 videos, were of rats. So a little bit of limitations what we have, but still we managed to have good videos of different animals, and the devices work as we expected. So the labeling notebook that we have, I'm not going to go into too much detail of how it's set up, but again, it's working with weights and biases, with 51, and we just run our system to load the data, and you can see how we use the 51 to displaying our videos, and to be able to label them. This is an image of a rat just passing by, and that's an annotation of possum. So that's the input that we get from CVAT. Those species that we don't know what they are, we can publish them onto iNaturalist. So some of the frames have been published there to see how it works. All the pipelines work as we expected. And then once we have all the labels, we train our models. We used Edge Impulse to train the models, so that we can embed the models onto the cameras. Edge Impulse has provided a nice user interface. So the idea with these devices is that other people will be able to train their own models, not only to identify rats, but to identify any other animals that might be relevant on their locations. And also to push the models onto, to load the models onto any other embedded device. So let's take a virtual tour to end this presentation onto New Zealand. So if you haven't been here, I will highly recommend it. So we are here on the right side of Australia. And if we zoom in on the North Island of New Zealand, we can see on the left side, we have a small kind of peninsula, which is called Taranaki. So that's where we set the cameras. Zooming in a little bit more, we can see a rounded green area, which is called Mount Taranaki, and it is a national park. And it is a mountain, and it is quite impressive. So it looks like this. It has a lot of significance for locals and for Maori and for biodiversity purposes. So we set up 5 of these cameras onto the closest part of the national park that you can see on this photo. Zooming in a little bit more, right there is where we were working with the cameras. And in this area, there was an area where we did intense predator control. So we set up a lot of traps, a lot of rat traps, and we wanted to see what were the numbers of the rats throughout the block, inside the block and outside the block. So for that, we set up the 5 wildlife watchers, 2 of them inside and 2 of them outside, and 1 of them right in the border, to see whether there was any gradient on the number of rats and on the number of native species. And we set the cameras there. We went with the students and with the community to set the cameras, and we set them up for a month. After a month, we came back and we labeled all the information, and we plotted onto a map, and we see that out of those days, more than 70% of the days that the cameras were active outside the protected area, they had a rat, and they recorded the presence of a rat. But inside the A24 block, the predator, the rat control area, we didn't see any rats. So that was good news. The traps were working, so they were not invasive species on that area. So we could say that native species should be coming back. And with the same information that we have from the cameras, we could see the number of weta, of the insects that we saw, that they were higher inside the block than outside the block. So it was a straight correlation there, and it is very encouraging. And the New Zealand Department of Conservation is quite happy with how these prototypes of the camera are working, and we are starting to work more on refining the communication side of things, the battery power side of things, the the kind of devices, the models that we use. So there is a lot of options to get involved and to try to optimize these devices. So Wildlife.ai is a non-for-profit where we use AI to accelerate wildlife conservation, and the project that I talk about today is just only one of the multiple projects that we have. Most of the projects involve computer vision to identify animals, some of them to the individual level, so using the marks on their skin or different sizes of the animal and so on. So how to get involved? Become a data ranger. Use your skills, couple of hours a week to be able to save some species. So if you jump onto Wildlife.ai, we have a section to get involved. You can fill up a form, and we will contact you with the project that might fit your skills. Become a citizen scientist. You can jump online on this QR code at the bottom, or you can look it up on Wildlife.ai and help us identify some fish species. You don't need to sign up, you don't need to log in or anything like that. You can just see few videos, and you have tutorials on to how to identify the most abundant fish here in New Zealand, for example, or in Sweden. We have another project in Sweden, so it will be really useful to get those labels. Become a partner. If you are working on a cool tool in computer vision that you want to test, reach out to us and try to partner with us. And there is more. Donate. We are a non-for-profit, so we operate on donations. Share our story if you think that there is anyone who might be interested on the work that we do. Please share our story and follow us on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's on a nutshell of some of the work that we do, and I'm very thankful to be here and to be able to share it with you. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Yep, it does look like we have a question in the Q&A from Pierre.
Cool. Let me just pop it up. I mean, I imagine that depending on where you place your wildlife watcher, there will be more or less animal traffic through it. If there is an easy path around or not, for instance, how do you deal with this for reproducibility? So the cameras that we have at the moment, we set them up for a month, and all of them were working fine. Some of them recorded like 4,000 videos, and they didn't run out of battery. So yeah, depending on where you put them or you place them, there will be more or less animal traffic. But if you find a trade-off of battery consumption and the number of days that are going to be active, the idea is to get a standardized sample. So if it's minimum of 10 days, then you only use the first 10 days of the cameras. If in one of the sections the camera ran out of battery because there was a lot of traffic, then that's what you need to do across the different devices. Let me know if that answered your question. Otherwise,
yep, so let's give it a couple more seconds if you have a burning question for Victor. Very interesting project, very important work, I think, that Victor and the gang are up to there at Wildlife.ai. So if you have a question, make sure to ask it in the Q&A. But let's do a quick reminder for everyone that may have joined late. Because this is a virtual event and we're not able to meet in person and distribute tasty snacks or cold beverages, we do give folks the opportunity to make a contribution to a charity that speaks to them. Wildlife.ai is one of the featured ones this quarter. So I posted in the chat the link. You may have to click on the link. I don't know if the cut and paste works in the chat. Head on over to vox51.com/charitable giving. Vote for a charity that speaks for you. We'll announce the winning charity when we release the blog post, either tomorrow or Friday. It's a simple, easy thing to do to make a good contribution to a good cause. And also, while you're there, if you're up for it, we always appreciate a star on the 51 project. Victor, it does look like we have one more question.
Yeah, whether TinyML has been useful for any of the projects. Yeah, it's crucial for the wildlife watcher. So the reason why we are trying to develop only a model to identify one single species is to make it as simple as possible and to make it as efficient as possible, so that it can be developed on the, so that it can be deployed onto the device and to use the less amount of power. So yeah, TinyML is the only way to go for us with embedded systems.
All right. Any more burning questions for Victor? Yes, we've got another one. Two more.
It was more about the reproducibility of your results. You could have a camera place where rats don't like to go and think the area is rat-free, but actually they just don't pass 10 meters away. I don't know how likely that is. So when you go into the last few individuals, it is really hard to know where they are, and it's really hard to attract them. So usually the way that we attract them, like we biologists attract them, is through food. But when there is only a few individuals, food is not on their priority list. There are other priorities like finding mates or looking for a place to find a house. So those are some of the kind of like techniques that we might be able to use to set up a camera on different kind of setups to see when there are low density of rats and to see where they are, the last ones. Hope that answered your question. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to email. Can your camera be powered via solar panel? Yes, it can, but the temperate rainforest that we have in New Zealand might potentially provide a few challenges. So we are trying them now, but yeah, depending on where you set up the camera, you will be able to have more coverage and more resources in terms of the solar panel. How about sound? Yeah, there is also a lot of work happening with bioacoustics, where we look mostly for bird calls and other more like vocal animals. So yeah, there is a lot of machine learning happening at the bioacoustic space. What I was quite surprised is that most of the bioacoustic work in terms of machine learning is computer vision. So it's just transforming the audio onto images and then looking at the spectrograms. So yeah, I was coming from a biologist kind of side of view. I was like, oh, and there might be some signal processing there working. But yeah, that was just something. What is major hurdle in what you do? The major hurdle is getting legislation changing and getting the move from business as usual to more environmental mind frame. That's probably one of the biggest hassles that we face. There are a lot of positive stuff. Bringing the community together and see some of the unique species still around. It is totally worth every single drop of energy that goes onto it. So yeah, a few hassles and hurdles, but a lot of positive outcomes.